I had my annual physical examination yesterday to find out how I'm doing health-wise, and turns out I found out more. Hey, Dave, I gotta ask you, whether this is a Philadelphia thing or not, have you ever been to a building that has two banks of elevators? And one bank goes to even-numbered floors, and the other bank goes to odd-numbered floors. No. And if you walk into the building and you just go to the first set of elevators you see, you might not even see the second bank. You just go to where the elevators are.
Yeah.
And if you're not paying attention, you're with everybody else. The doors open up, you get in, and you're going to an odd-numbered floor, but you're in one of the even-numbered elevators, and you're looking for 7, and all you can press is 8 and what comes after? 6.
I wasn't going to help you.
Oh, my God.
Oh, wow.
So you get it, and you're too embarrassed to walk back out of the elevator. So now you've got to go to the 8th floor and try to find some stairs down so that you can walk back down. You can't find the other elevators because everything is all twisted around. And what I'm trying to tell you is I've got high blood pressure.
Holy hell! I didn't see that coming. What's even funnier is like okay, let's say you get out the 8th floor, you need to get to the 7th floor. You need to kind of do the walk of shame of like getting on the other elevator. Oh, wait a minute! No, you can't, because it doesn't even stop at that floor.
No, I had to either take stairs down or go through all, like I would have had to have walked through different doctor's offices. You know what I mean? Like I would have had to walk through the place where they're taking blood and then the reception area for another doctor. I would have had to go through all these other places where I didn't belong to find the even numbered elevators.
What a weird pickle to get in.
Or find stairs, which I couldn't find stairs either. Dave, I'm not kidding you. I had to go all the way back down to the lobby, ask directions, get told that there are elevators right behind me, turn around, find the other bank of elevators, and then go up to the right floor. It was, I'm telling you, then they bring me up and they take my blood pressure. They say, geez, you got high blood pressure. And you know what I told them? You know what I told them? I'll tell you what I told them. You're goddamn right, I've got high blood pressure.
And on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the soothing show where we center ourselves to talk about making comics.
Serenity now and making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, your ever so calm author of the Webcomics Handbook and the cool as a cucumber creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his gentle, babbling brook of a friend, Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
I don't know about the Brook part. And this hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk to Karl Kerschl.
Well, Brad, I'm very excited to welcome one of our favorite cartoonists and artists in the world onto the show. Karl Kerschl is here with us today, and I want to give you the URL so you can check it out while we're talking to Karl. KarlKershl.com. KarlKerschl.com. I almost messed that up as I was going through it. KarlKerschl.com. But Karl, welcome to the show. Thank you.
I was listening to see if it was right.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, my friend.
Thanks for having me back. It's a pleasure. I'm always. I don't think I've missed an episode of this show, honestly, since you guys started, except for maybe the one that I was on before that I refused to listen to. But every other one I think I've seen.
It is a little bit hard to listen to your own voice, isn't it?
Yeah, it's weird. I don't like doing it. No one likes the sound of their own voice, except my kids.
Well, it's funny because I mentioned this to Brad the other day, but I was listening to something we had recorded about a decade ago. Yeah. And it was interesting to hear in our voices how much younger we sounded. Like, that's odd to me that the vocal cords can either stretch or get saggy or whatever they do as they get older, such that you can sound, quote unquote, like an older person than you did 10 years previous. It was weird. I was more like, oh, Brad, we're having a lot of fun talking about comics a decade ago.
Yeah, you can hear youth, right? Like, I don't know if you've been watching any of, like the Harrison Ford's on that new Apple TV show. I think he's on one of the Yellowstone shows. But like, it just sounds like there's gravel in his throat. You know, it's like, you can hear the age.
It almost makes me wonder when they de-age, what was the doctor that did Ant-Man? But when they went back to the 60s or 70s for him, I wonder if they pitched up his voice a teeny tiny bit.
Oh, yeah.
To have it sound young. Anyway, so for those that don't know Karl, one of my favorite titles of all time, Abominable Charles Christopher, you have to go check out. I love it so much. But you would also know Karl's work from Gotham Academy, from Isola, from various other DC titles, Flash probably being the most prominent one that you've worked on, right? I would guess.
It's up there, yeah. Gotham Academy has probably taken that title, though. I did some Batman stuff last year, which was really cool to do, like actual proper main title Batman, which was kind of like a bucket list thing.
That's great. Yeah.
But honestly, now like there are people who message me who are unaware that I do any superhero stuff at all because they only know the Abominable Charles Christopher.
Yeah, really? I mean, you do kind of keep a foot in both worlds in terms of independently owned, independently created comics and the DC world. And I can see that there would be readers that never the twain shall meet kind of a thing, where they had no idea that you did Charles Christopher, and then the Charles Christopher readers had no idea that you're doing Gotham Academy, you know? It's
actually something I've sort of fantasized talking to you guys about because having that, like, it is like another leg under the table kind of thing, but it's also kind of massively to my detriment personally, because I don't gain a lot of ground in either of those lanes, you know, I have so little focus,
right?
Because I'm, you know, like doing web comics when I started in 2007, like I just there was very little risk, you know, like it was a hobby for me. And it turns out that it's actually become probably one of the most important things that I do. But I never really double down on any of it because I've always kind of got one foot in this stream and one foot in the other stream.
Yeah.
Right.
So it never became a situation where you did web comics and then all of a sudden mainstream comics or corporate comics was there and you said you left web comics behind because your street was paved with gold and everything was wonderful once you got that first contract.
Yeah, that's probably a dream for some people, right? Like that's probably...
Yeah, well, that's what I mean is that I think that's the expectation for a lot of people listening to the show is that, I'll do web comics until I get picked up by a large corporation like Marvel or DC, and then everything will be great. You know, they can give me the standard rich and famous contract and they can roll the credits. And what you're saying is from your first person experience, it ain't quite that easy, right?
Well, it's not. And it's also, it was exactly the opposite for me. Like I started in mainstream comics that was my intention, was to work for Marvel. My high school yearbook says I want to work for Marvel Comics. And then I had done that by the time I was 19 or 20. And I realized after doing a bunch of comics that I just didn't like, I still love it, but it's, I was never good at that deadline schedule. And I learned some really hard lessons. Yeah. I messed up a lot. And then I around like the webcomics thing for me felt like just like a creative outlet. Like it wasn't until I started doing that I felt any kind of actual artistic fulfillment. You know what I mean?
Well, can I ask you, because to build on Brad's question about like people that, you know, they're doing their independent stuff, but they're fantasizing about being on a big title or a corporate title. How can you take us through the mental game of what Karl, the independent cartoonist and artist, is like versus Karl working on Batman or working on Flash or working on Gotham Academy? What are the highs and what are the lows for both?
Once you get past like the itch scratching of having drawn a published Spider-Man comic or a Batman comic or a Superman comic or something like that, which is an amazing feeling. I mean, don't get me wrong; it's really cool. It's really cool to kind of give that back to your younger self.
Sure.
Which I think about a lot. Like I have to do this because otherwise, if I went back in time, I told my younger self that I just turned down a Batman job, then I'd feel like a heel, right? But once you get past that, I find it's kind of samey. Like my attitude toward that stuff now is that it's like kind of corporate. You know, like it's not kind of corporate; it's literally corporate. It's kind of like working for a shoe company or something. Like you can't expect them to. They're running a business, and you can't get too upset when things don't go the way you might have envisioned them.
Right. Right.
Along those same lines, I'm talking to somebody right now that's working on a project, and she was amazed at the number of people who had to sign off on her work. Like it was one of those decisions by committee. And I was just curious, are you having kind of the same experience when you're working for Marvel or DC, where there's a whole lot of people who have to sign off on the things that you're doing?
Almost never, almost not at all.
Oh,
I know people who
good.
I have colleagues who do kind of have to jump through some hoops editorially. In my case, it's always been really like part of the reason I keep doing that work is, well, first and foremost, because it's a very reliable paycheck. When you do that work, like Marvel and DC pay very, very promptly. And I know a lot of those people, and I'm friends with a lot of those editors and people in the industry. So it's a very comfortable place to be. But probably because of those relationships, I rarely have to. Like, it's honestly like an editor will say, "Hey, it just happened yesterday. Do you want to do this quick cover for a thing we're doing?" And I said, "Okay." And then I'll usually just do it and hand it in and never hear about it until I get paid.
That's amazing.
But that's not the case with, like, I'll do work for like Ubisoft is a big video game company who's right around the corner from us in Montreal.
Right.
So I know a lot of people from there, and I've done a bunch of work for them. And when it's big game companies or advertising companies, then you're in that sort of hell where there's just a constant back and forth for weeks. In fact, I write into my quote, when I quote them for a job, it'll say 4 rounds of revisions. And after that, you should have to start charging them again because it would just go on forever.
Yes. Yeah. Because then now you're starting to lose money, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the thing that I found, and this is probably what you're hinting at too, Karl, is that the more money that's involved, the more the notes come to exist. You know what I mean?
For sure,
so,
yeah.
Like, the companies where it's like mom and pop and they're making enough to pay the mortgage and they're happy. That's 1 round of notes. When it's a mid-sized company, it's 2 rounds of notes. But like you said, with Ubisoft or somebody who's making hundreds of millions of dollars on a title, it's a lot of notes in that process because there's a lot of job titles that have to go into that.
There's a lot of middle management. There are a lot of teams that frankly are, from what I've seen, just terrified of making the wrong decision. It's probably a lot like the movie and television industry, right? But despite being owned by Disney and Warner, like Marvel and DC publishing are run like small shops. I mean, it's a pretty close-knit, informal operation. There are not that many people in those offices, and it all just, there are writers' summits, and they plan for like big events and things like that. But it's all really familiar in a really nice way. Like I can't think of it. Like, I can't think of another big operation like that is quite as comfortable.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Well, because again, the money, I think it comes down to money, because I think because they're owned by these massive international conglomerates that make hundreds of billions of dollars. Like if you look at the line item of DC publishing under Warner Brothers, master end of year sheet, that one line item is just under craft service table for the most recent Batman movie, in terms of like costs involved. So I honestly think that's why they get to fly a little bit out of the radar, or below the radar rather.
Though the page rates reflect that, by the way, like comic book page rates are not like they're pretty crappy. They haven't really changed much in the last 20 years or 30, however long I've been doing this.
Well, listen, Karl, I've got to ask you, because I'm a little bit of a fanboy, and this is something that the first thing that would come to my mind. You worked on a Batman, and you got to have that experience. The question is, because Batman has the best rogues gallery out of all the superheroes, did you get to draw your favorite Batman villain? And if not, who are you still hoping one day you get a chance to draw?
I've drawn Batman villain. I've done a Joker. I don't care about the Joker, though. I never really cared much about the Joker. But I did in Gotham Academy. Gotham Academy was really, really kind of a love letter to a lot of Batman the Animated Series, which is probably the best Batman that's ever existed. And so we did a lot of, I did Clayface. I did, what else did we have? Killer Croc. A bunch of those guys.
Clayface would be fun, I bet.
Some pretty obscure ones. Yeah, they're super fun. Like it was great fun to do. Batman does have I didn't do Mr. Freeze. I really like Mr. Freeze. Two-Face is probably my favorite Batman villain.
Well, Brad, let me ask you, because Karl got to do, sort of a bucket list of working on Batman, which, by the way, what a fantastic bucket list thing to check off. If you could do, I don't know that I've ever asked you this. Do you have on your bucket list to do one issue of a Marvel or DC before you die?
No, honestly, no. I've got favorite characters and stuff, but like to actually sit down and do an issue for one of them, it's nothing that really that I would. It's not an experience I'm looking for.
Because I will be honest. I don't want to do a title, but what I want to do is Karl can correct me on what the correct term is, but I want to do one of the backup stories where. Yeah. It's like, I want to do like a Great Lake Avengers story in like the back of something, or like I want to do Paste Pot Pete, a mini adventure for Paste Pot Pete in the back of some book. I think being able to write like a joy-filled, silly one, that is legitimately on my bucket list. That would be fun to do at some point in my life.
That's not out of the realm of possibility. I mean, Kate Beaton did, I think she did a Spider-Man issue or a short story in a Spider-Man issue. Like in fact, now more than ever, they take a lot of chances on lighter-hearted stories, independent artists. I mean, you could definitely do that kind of.
Well, then I'm going to Susan McTaggart that, Karl. I'm going to put that in the universe that I'm ready to write my Paste Pot Pete backup story in the back of Spider-Woman issue number 32. That's what I'm going to do. Okay, so what are you working on now, though? This is the more exciting thing. What's on your desk right now?
Right now, I'm prepping for this kick. So I mean, like just to tie it all together, my career has been doing mainstream superhero comics generally, and then I kind of realized around the time I started making web comics that I wanted to like indie stuff is just in my blood. Like I'm just sort of like a weird anti-authoritarian. Like I just want to go do my own thing. And so I started doing the Charles Christopher comic, and then I did. I did the Isola comic through Image, which is still going on, but we're on a long break. And I find myself just going deeper and deeper down the independent route, and that means basically kickstarting. You know, basically working for I frequently I'm working on something, and my wife's like, "I don't know what you're working on. What are you doing right now?" And I'm like, stuff. I don't know. I'm basically working for free all the time. And she's like, "Okay." I said, "Well, it's gonna somewhere down the road. Someone's gonna pay for some of this stuff." So I'm kind of just living on faith that I can kickstart these different projects that I'm working on. Like Charles Christopher was never intended to be monetized ever, but then when I started doing the books, Kickstarter became a thing, and it happened to work out. So now I'm doing a space comic, a sci-fi comic on the side. Does this sound familiar? I decided to do a sci-fi web comic on the side.
It's beautiful, by the way. Tell us a bit about it. How does the title lay out? How did the story start to unfold? What is it? How did it come about?
Yeah, it's a story about it's called Death Transit Tanager, which is basically a play on like convoluted manga and anime series that I've loved in the past. And it's about a woman named Tanager Ray who has basically she can see and speak to dead people. So it's a story about her transiting, basically helping souls find their way into the afterlife or find their bodies. So every issue is basically like a murder mystery in space. And it's got a bunch of kind of like manga action in it, and it's done in like manga halftones. And basically, I just wanted to make mangas, and I did this. I started during the pandemic when nothing was going on and nothing was going to print, and I just did a 20-page story, and I really, really fell in love with it. So now I'm finally going to publish it in print, and I've done a color backup story for it that I'm going to include, and a bunch of covers, and so that's launching in a few days. So what's on my drawing table right this moment is basically just Photoshop files of stupid Kickstarter graphics. Like I'm just like I've got a list in front of me of stuff I have to create graphics for, and I'm like creating, like mock-up sketch covers and things like there's so much involved in prepping these Kickstarters, and it's all it's just a ton of work.
Can I ask a technical follow-up, because I'm entranced by it, is that you made a very conscious choice to do the sort of 60s, 70s, 80s halftones of manga, where, you know, both the speed and the economics of Japanese manga in the 70s and 80s was you're going to print in black and white, and you're going to use a lot of halftone and a lot of speed lines. And it's this really cool, distinctive look. How did that choice come about for you? And does it also play well in terms of both the economics of your time and the economics of putting out as many pages as you can? Because I've never worked that way, and I'm sort of curious for someone who has worked in the Marvel and the DC world. Are you able to crank out pages much faster using sort of a Japanese technique of halftone speed lines and a lot of that?
It's faster in that I don't have to color anything. Like coloring for me takes ages. On other series, usually like I work with colorists, but on this, when I'm coloring my own covers, I'm coloring my own backup story. I just really like manga, and I like that look, and I like the look of halftone dot patterns on line art. You know, like it's something about it just does it for me, I guess. And especially after, like, when I lived in Japan for a year, I would go and buy Shonen Jump every week, like the big phone book size manga collection. And like a lot of it, like, you know, actually there's a bigger percentage of it than you'd think is really good. Like there's only like a few stories that are not really up to the same quality. But I just kept, you know, like the more of it I read, the more I just kind of wanted to see if I could do that. And I do employ kind of a quicker, a scratchier brushstroke. I sort of trained myself over the years because I love animation, to draw in a style that was extremely clean, like a really, really perfect clean line. And it's, you know, now I'm trying to force myself to loosen up and draw things more energetically, just to give life to the images on the page. Yeah,
that energy comes through, and I think adds to the sense of the pace of the story, which is a nice 1-2 punch that you're able to have that impact the story.
One of the other cool things about it is that Clip Studio makes it so easy to do those halftone patterns that, like, whereas in the past, if I was doing this physically or traditionally, you know, you got to buy the deleter sheets of halftone in whatever pattern you want, which are expensive to begin with. Then kind of like meticulously paste it down and then cut around it with an X-Acto knife. It's just like, it's extremely laborious. So with Clip Studio, it's literally a one button click that'll turn, like, I'll just color stuff in grayscale the way I would ordinarily, and then just click the halftone button, and then it just turns into a cool looking halftone pattern. And then I'll add or remove stuff as I like, or like scribble on it a bit to give it a little more life.
Yeah. And that'll protect against moire patterns as well, which was always a big problem with working in halftone, right?
Yeah. Unless you start adding multiple layers of that, and then you can get yourself into trouble again. But I try to keep all of the halftone stuff on one layer, because then you're safe with the patterns. Yeah.
Well, hold on. I want to pause for a second, because Brad, when you were talking about moire patterns, I always found that no matter how mathematically perfectly you planned out a moire pattern, there's still a good chance when you're using sort of Bende dots and stuff, that at certain reproduction sizes, you're going to get them. What did you mean when you said CSP can help cut down on that possibility?
My assumption was that CSP has that coded in so that it takes care of the moire through the process.
I see. So if the file is set up at 300 DPI, that it knows what... is that what you're intimating? Okay.
Yeah, it's accounting for that as those files are being output.
Well, Karl, let me ask you: have you done sort of test outputs and where you're like, okay, no moire patterns?
Well, I've never done offset test outputs, so I'm a little nervous about what's going to happen when I print this thing. I've done, you know, regular digital printouts of it, and everything seems fine. I don't know if Clip Studio accounts for the patterns based on resolution. What I do know is that you can slide the frequency of the dots. So if you're worried, you can just like, and it's dynamically.
That's nice. There's a slider. Oh, that's
just
cool.
Like you click the halftone button, and there's a slider that goes from X frequency to Y frequency, and it'll change the size of your dot. So if you're worried about it printing weirdly, or if it does print weirdly in a proof, You could probably just tweak that and end up with something.
God damn it! So sorry, I'm cussing because
it really
this
makes you want to switch to Clip Studio, doesn't it?
I gotta switch. Literally everybody in my life.
Carl, I've been working on him for years at this point. I've been working on this guy.
Years. I've been shouting at my headphones while I'm on walks, saying, "Dave, for God's sake!"
Have you heard though that Adobe is finally trying to steal some, or not steal, but they're going to mimic some of CSP's functionality apparently in the next update of Adobe? Did you see that?
Yeah, they should do that and charge about 20 times more for it.
That's right. That's right.
I have my 3 Charles Christopher books, the felt hardcovers, right above my desk. Actually, I'm looking at them. They came up beautiful. They're one of the most beautiful art pieces I've ever seen in the comics world. Describe for us and for people what the Death Transit book is going to look like, what it's going to feel like, what it's going to be like.
Well, it's a traditional comic book, so it's the first time I haven't done like a book. It's the first issue of a comic, which is weird for me. I mean, like with all the trappings of a comic, it'll probably have a nicer cover stock and probably some. We'll see. Like by the time this airs, who knows what will have come out? but my intention is to put some nice like UV gloss on it, and I want to play with some different cover effects and things like that. But in the interior will be a black and white main story, and then a color backup story, and probably some extra stuff in there. Just on nice comic book paper. So part of the concern about this Kickstarter for me is like, well, I have a couple like the economy of single issue comics on Kickstarter is wild to me. Like the fact that, I mean, because you're not working at giant publisher scales, everyone like the standard price of a single comic book reward on Kickstarter is like $25 US or something like that. Which, if you think of Kickstarter as a store, which many people do, seems insane, right? Like you're like, I'm going to spend $25 on a 32-page comic book, but that's just the way it works. And so I'm curious to see how this campaign has done now that it is over. And also I'm a little worried. Well, not worried, but I'm a little concerned about the black and white portion. Like, will people be put off by a black and white or mostly black and white comic book?
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
Right. Well, can I ask a logistics question that will actually, I think, benefit everyone who is a listener and a cartoonist outside of the U.S.? Can I ask you a logistics question with your shipping? Because you're Canada, and but I would imagine, and tell me if I'm wrong here, I would imagine that most of your audience, your purchasers of Kickstarter or books, is probably in the U.S. So
Correct.
What solutions or roadblocks have you found towards producing a book in Canada and getting it to the US, or as wouldn't be the case for an Australian cartoonist trying to ship mainly to the US, or a German cartoonist trying to ship to the US? What have been your roadblocks and solutions to that?
Well, I initially I was in a bit of, after printing, kickstarting the first Charles Christopher, the third volume that you've got there. I charged, I think, what was in an accurate amount for shipping generally, but then pandemic pricing hit, and I kind of panicked. And a lot of the shipping from Canada, like via Canada Post or whomever you choose to use, is outrageously expensive, even within Canada. So my situation is unique because I'm in Montreal and we're very, very close to the US border. So what I did was I would just pack up. I would use Indicia, or I think I'm using Pirate Ship now, or one of these. Like it's basically a shipping website.
Yeah, Pirate Ship. Yep.
That finds you the best shipping price, but it's all for U.S. shipping. So I box up all my stuff. I put labels on it, U.S. labels on it, and then I started just driving across the border with a carload of comics, of books, boxes, and shipping them using media mail because it's the best, best way to ship anything.
Yeah,
and
of
then
course.
It turned out that the last time I went, like sometime it sucked because first of all, it takes a lot of time. Second of all, you have to jump through a bunch of border hoops. And if they decide, which has happened, if the customs guys decide that they don't like what one guy actually, he opened up the box. He's like, he actually held up the book and he's like, what is this? Who would buy this? And I was like, I don't know.
Wow.
People who like books, like. So
I'm glad the thick necks U.S. Customs and Border Patrol is being kind to your cartooning career. That's nice. Yeah.
It's literally like a bunch of bored dudes in a customs office at the border. Like,
exactly. Hey, Jimmy, come check out this guy's life work.
It was literally like that. Well, what is this? Who would buy it? Who would buy something like this?
Buy this? Oh my God!
Wow, right to your face. Oh man. Oh God.
But on that very trip, actually, what happened was I did manage to get to the post office, and coming out of the post office, I met this guy who was clearly francophone, like I think he had Montreal or Quebec place, and I ended up talking to him, and he just runs a small business taking people's packages across the border to do exactly what I was doing for a small percentage.
Oh, really?
So I was like, give me your number. I'm gonna hook you up with a whole bunch of work. And now I and the rest of my studio basically just call this guy. He comes and picks up all our stuff. He drives across the border. Exact same process, except I don't have to go and do it. So
that's great. That's great.
I can use media mail for everything.
Let me ask one ignorant follow-up, and then we'll leave that topic. Is that a NAFTA thing where you don't have to pay any sort of duties or excise tax or import tax on bringing those across the border? Or are you mainly lucking out and getting things across the border, but 1 out of 10 times you might get dinged?
There is how does it work? Well, I basically bring across a shipping manifest that says everything I'm bringing, and I think if it was made in Canada, which it says the books say printed in Canada on them, then I think they are. Yeah, I think it falls under a free trade thing, at least in terms of publishing and books and stuff like that. So I've never had to. I always have to pay I think there's it's like a $10 fee at the customs office just for bringing stuff over, like a flat fee. But then I've never been charged for any kind of shipping or exporting.
Okay, cool. Well, that $10 went right into that guy's pocket, so that's good to know. All right. So, okay, but anyway, the main reason I wanted to talk about this is because Brad and I have such an American-centric shipping viewpoint that I wanted to hear how you do it. And I think your advice is actually really helpful for all of our Australian cartoonist listeners. So, guys, just drive it across the border, and then you're good to go. Just get in the car in Sydney and then drive it across the border, and you'll be set.
Yeah. You know that it's actually cheaper for me to take my Canadian orders, drive them across the border, and ship them back to Canada than it is for me to mail them via Canada Post domestically.
Really?
So, Canada Post, I'll do you one worse. It is cheaper for me to ship a drive book, which is, I think, 3.5 pounds. They're really heavy, to Australia, the other side of the globe, than certain spots in Canada, because Canada Post has negotiated some weird bonkers rate with the United States Postal Service. And I don't know what Canada Post is doing. Is it one guy that has to personally drive around Canada? I don't know why it's so expensive.
There's some pretty remote places in Canada. What about Alaska? What's your shipping like to Alaska?
So the beauty, this is one of the few things that America did right. Like our national parks, we did right. And our postal service, I personally feel like, is one of the things we did right, because it's the same price for the most part to ship a media mail book to Alaska as it is for me to ship it to Maine, to Florida, to Hawaii, to Puerto Rico. And that's bonkers distances when you think about it in terms of flying from Puerto Rico to Alaska. If you're an Alaskan cartoonist, Brad, correct me if I'm wrong, that's like 4,000 miles, 4,500 miles?
That sounds exactly right.
That's a gigantic flight, and it's still $3 to send that book to, if you're in Anchorage and you're sending to someone in San Juan, then anyway, it's one of the few things the U.S. does right. But anyway, enough about that. We don't need to go on that anymore.
I'm terrified that media mail is going to go away at some point.
I know.
You and me both.
That's a genuine fear.
I know.
You and me both, and everybody that does what we do. We're all hoping media mail stays the same for a long, long time. Here's another question that I'd like to ask about the Kickstarter. You're right now, as we're recording, you are on the cusp of launching this. What does your strategy look like? Do you have, in other words, do you have social media posts planned out? Do you have a week by week strategy? What does the next 4 weeks look like for you, and how do you go about getting that done?
This is what I'm here for, just to get into the weeds with you guys about this stuff, because I think it's fascinating. Yeah. My strategy, I'm I try to be prepared, but I'm not like week to week social media posts prepared. Like I've got enough assets that I think I can stretch stuff out throughout the month. But really, what I think is interesting, something I want to ask you guys is that it's not like you do. Do you still do like patron exclusive secret launches?
Oh yeah,
because
I do, powerful.
I imagine they would be if you have a lot of patrons. But my thing with it is that like and I don't have a ton of experience with Kickstarter. I've only done the one campaign, but I feel like I've been in it for a while. Like the pre-launch notification thing on Kickstarter is like 70% of the Kickstarter game. And to do the secret soft launch, you kind of miss out on that on Kickstarter, emailing those people who have clicked the notify me button. And so I didn't do the patron thing because I thought like it's not worth it. Like I'll give patrons free stuff extra, but I honestly believe that like the pre-launch of this campaign is like more important than like the next like 20 days, like until you get to the end of the campaign where you can start juicing things up again. Like, yeah, Dave, please.
Well, I will say, first of all, I agree with you that the first 3 to 5 days and the final 3 to 5 days, that's the key to the whole enchilada, right? Boy, what a mixed metaphor, key to an enchilada. But I will say that I have found that I've offered different kinds of sort of early patronage exclusives if you back the project in the first 24 hours. So I'll like Karl was intimating, I'll do the 24-hour secret launch where I'm not pushing it out to any of my known public social medias or blogs or anything like that. I will just mention it on Patreon, and I'll give him a couple days heads up saying you have 24 hours to buy it. And in that if you buy it in that 24 hours, you'll either get extra bookmarks, or you'll get a different kind of cover, or you'll get digital rewards, or you'll get this or that. And my thought is, echoing what Karl was saying, is I have all these people that have signed up to get notified on my Kickstarter launches. And for the most part, if I have a tier that only exists for 24 hours and it says Patreon exclusive, hey, this goes out just to the Patreon backers, you have 24 hours, right? Then that's the Patreon description. It's most people's own moral code. If they're a fan of mine, they won't click that tier and claim it if they're not a patron. They'll be like, well, Dave will, and even if they don't have a strong moral code about it, I know what they're thinking is Dave has some kind of spreadsheet and he's going to cross compare, and I'm not going to have been a patron, and then he'll not give me the reward. So I'll just pick a normal one. Or here's the thing, even worst case scenario, if they do click the thing and they, as an early Kickstarter backer, claim it, oh no, I'm out a couple extra pennies. And frankly, I've rewarded someone who's followed me on Kickstarter again and again and again. Yeah. So to me, it's a lost leader that I'm perfectly willing to honor and give to them as someone who's in the ecosystem of someone following me intensely. But does that address your concern, or did you have a different fear that you were like?
No, it's not really a fear. It's just that like I guess my thinking was that there's no actual way to secretly launch it. Like once it goes live, it's going to blast out of emails to however many people are following it. So I guess one solution is to have a tier that says patrons only and just go on the honor system, which is fine. But it's hard to. I was trying to figure out a way to secretly launch it.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. One of the benefits that it's given to me is that because I am asking my most intense readers of like in this case, Drive, let's say Drive, right? Hey, patrons, you're the super fans of Drive. Let's have you're going to back this Patreon at some point in the 30 days. So just do it in the first 24 hours. And if you do, you're going to get these extra stuff. So what I've done too is I front loaded that campaign. I've burst out of the gate. Usually I've made my goal within the first 24 hours with a Drive campaign, or 48 hours. And then I've also gotten on Kickstarter's radar. It's triggered their algorithm for sharing it with other people. So I feel like it's a win-win for me. But I understand your concern that it's no longer as private as it used to be. That it's still kind of secretly public in that anybody who wants to is seeing it. And it's frankly, if you're doing your job, it's quickly moving up the algorithm on the front page anyway. But it's kind of, I get what you're saying. It's imperfect. I
guess really I just wanted to illustrate for anyone who is considering running a Kickstarter that the pre-launch game is probably like half the game. Like that's really getting a bunch of people subscribed to be notified when it goes live is really like that's my main strategy. And then like beyond that, I've got I think I'm probably going to do a bunch of like original art, like not in its own tiers, but just like I want to do some live drawing as the campaign rolls on, just to chat with people, draw. And then like what I did last time was I would do a few like animal drawings or pieces of art live on camera. And then I would just put them on, I would just drop them all on the Kickstarter campaign in one day and say, okay, there you go. And then they would sell out pretty rapidly. And I would do that. Which worked really well.
Now this live streaming, is that something that you do regularly anyway? In other words, is that something that you've kind of cultivated?
I used to, not so much anymore. I would go on Twitch and do it.
I was just curious. I was going to say is which platform are you using? Because that's something that I'm so awkward that I can't do that. Like I really can't do live drawing. And that's something I'm always fascinated by is like how you're able to do that. And also what the best platform is for people who can do that.
I started using Twitch, several years ago, I don't remember, just because there were not that many, it wasn't flooded with comics people. And then it slowly, it was really diminishing returns. I think we talked about this last time, but like, it was just, I use OBS and I was streaming. It could easily be YouTube or whatever. But like I think, I don't think they have to be live. I think if you put video up of you drawing whatever, it'll drive traffic to your page.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, it's kind of our superpower is people are fascinated to see how the sausage is made and when it comes to art. And so it's really low hanging fruit to get people excited.
Plus, you both draw at conventions, right? I mean, like when you're sketching in books and things, like you do enough of that stuff and it really becomes, you kind of forget that anyone's watching it.
Yeah, absolutely. Brad, not so much at conventions, but yeah, we take your meaning that, well, and so with one of the reasons too, speaking about front loading campaign is, like, I know that I'm going to back Death Transit already, right? Like that's a given. I'm going to go, in fact, when we're done recording, I'm probably going to go back it right now. But I just want to reinforce for people, one of the reasons psychologically why you want to front load your backers in there is that a weird psychological thing happens where the perception of success reinforces for a backer that they should back. It's a weird sort of like a stamp of approval by other hundreds or thousands of people that help this next person click, yes, I want to back it. And it's just it's another reason why my campaigns that didn't do so great, one of the reasons is I didn't jump out of the gate very well. So I just want to reinforce what Karl said so wisely, which is those first 2-3 days, that sort of pre-launch game is super important because you've got to jump out of the gate quick.
Yeah. It's like Brad's philosophy of putting the number of patrons who back their thing on the page, right? I mean, success generates more success, I think.
Yeah, especially if you've got a certain amount of content that's like mine, you don't see anyplace else. You've got to have kind of a reason to click on that. And if you've got a whole bunch of people on your Patreon or whichever platform you're on, that's kind of an indication of that. So that's kind of powerful to do. And then, of course, the last 3 days is all about urgency, right?
Yes.
And talk about that, because you've been through this before. You've been through 30 days or just about 30 days at this point where you're probably tired of the sound of your own voice or you're tired of talking about yourself so frequently. Then you've got to build up urgency over those last 3 days. It's tough, right?
It's really hard. I mean, Kickstarter does a lot for you. Just in the way it operates at the beginning and end of a campaign. The urgency thing, I feel like I didn't have a plan for it the first time around. so much as I would just wake up every morning sweating, thinking like, what am I not doing? Like there's got to be something. And so I'd like start throwing things up. It literally was like I guess I could. I mean, I could do some prints. It's actually how I did the calendar. Like I didn't plan to do a calendar. I just had all this art, and I was like, what can I do that'll fit in this box that would be kind of cool? And so this time I'm in terms of urgency, like I'm limiting some stuff. Like, I mean, all the original art stuff is limited. I'm doing some sketch covers, which will be limited, obviously. And then some of the variant covers, I think I'm going to put a limit on. Like, it's hard to know, but it's hard to know how many of those will actually sell or what the limits should be. But it's stuff that you can change mid-campaign. So it's, yeah, man, I don't know. It's just like for me, it's just like, the campaign is really dynamic, like literally dynamic. And that, like, I'm just rolling with whatever is happening that day, and then trying to not feel the real lows in the middle of the campaign.
Yeah. It's dynamic is the right way to describe it, because you have to maintain a certain amount of mental flexibility of these days are really humming. I'm going to build on whatever this success was of this thing that I just added, this tier I just added, or this thing I just added to the campaign. And then you got a couple of days where like nothing has happened. You cannot move the needle. And that's when you have to be flexible to just start saying, well, all right, we're going to do some original content. We're going to do some streaming. We're going to do some added things to generate excitement. And it really is a day by day thing. You know, amongst 30 days, it's like 30 individual little campaigns that, how do I generate excitement about this?
Or it goes backwards, God forbid. Like sometimes your funding amount will drop down because someone bailed on a.
I know. I always hate it when like there was a whale. Like Beth's my assistant. Beth and I in the studio, we always joke about like there'll be like some Swiss sugar daddy who went in big and did like a $500 Kickstarter tier of this and that. And then for whatever reason on day 28, they back out. And you're like, no, my Swiss sugar daddy, no, come back. What did I do wrong?
I just was curious. Like I often wondered, like I was thinking about it on my dog walk this morning. I was thinking like, do you think because you launched a Kickstarter for that follow-up documentary, like mid-pandemic, do you think you would go back to that? Like, would that be something worth kickstarting again? Because I want to see it.
It's funny that you should mention that, because Fred was over this weekend. We went to go see Ant-Man and didn't quite enjoy it. And we were talking about storyline, which was what that project was going to be. And so the short answer, Karl, is that we do want to do a project. But we did 2 test interviews for that project. For those that are not familiar with it, we were kickstarting something at the beginning of the pandemic. It was going to be basically a web-based show, a short format interview with cartoonists from comic books, from webcomics, from New Yorker, from illustration, talking about their process and this and that, and how they basically a version of what we're doing right now, but just filmed. The problem is each interview cost, I think it was like, it's a couple years back, but let's say $7,000 to $10,000. Like cameras are expensive, camera operators. We were shooting with a really good lighting. We had makeup people, we had sound. Even on the cheap in LA, shit got expensive. And so we just didn't, we were looking at the numbers with a couple years on, having done the test shoots going, I don't know that we can make this back for a web-based format, And so that's all. It's a long answer of saying, I don't know how we're going to do that. Unless we could figure out a way to sell it on one of our long-term plans was to sell it on to a 9th tier streaming service who might do the arts. Like, I don't know if you guys know, there's like a Metropolitan Art streaming service, or there's a couple based out of New York that like they show a lot of ballet and then they show a lot of gallery interviews and this and that. And I was like, if we could sell it on to like a 9th tier streamer, we could make this profitable. But it was a lot of energy and cost a lot of money. And I don't know that it didn't have the emotional or financial return in it that we were kind of hoping for. So it's a project that right now is on the back burner, and I don't know what would replace it, is the truth.
I was just curious because I thought if it was just a timing pandemic thing, maybe it would who knows, but it sounds like you would have to pre-sell it and then fund the production costs.
I mean, I could go into a lot of details of why it's so expensive, but if you're flying a cartoonist out to LA, you also, if they're coming from the East Coast, you kind of have to pay for 2 hotel days, and you have to pay for a good flight to get them out here, and you got to give them a per diem, and you got to do, and so that's a couple $1,000 just for that, and then the cameras and the lights, and that's $7,000 to $10,000, and then the editing's another couple $1,000. So it just, each episode would be remarkably expensive. And I want to do it, but I don't know. I haven't yet figured out, that's a better way to say it, how to make it work. Because I do want to do it, but I haven't yet figured it out.
Yeah.
But our big long-term goal in other projects is to do a documentary on Winsor McKay's life.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He to me is fascinating because he's sort of the last connecting tissue between all of American and Canadian comic book, comic making and animation. He's sort of in the same way they used to say, Leonardo da Vinci was the last person that knew everything when he was alive. Winsor McKay was the last person that knew everything there was to know about any form of cartooning that existed when he was alive. And I think he would be fascinating to do. I also think Harriman would be fun to do a documentary on. I think the fact that he, as a Black cartoonist, had to hide all of that in his life, fascinating. And the way and how he had to work with Hearst and all the ways he had to navigate that, fascinating. Anyway, I don't know why this became about me. Sorry, shit, Karl. Why did you ask that?
I was interested. That Harriman story would be a great biopic. I would watch that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So listen, Karl, as we're wrapping things up, one question that we ask from time to time, if you could imagine that you could step into a parallel universe, right? You step into a parallel universe, you've got no connections, nothing is weighing you down, and you're going to come back to your central universe with no loss of time, all right? So you can go over there, no restrictions, no attachments. What do you do with the month that you got?
It's a month away.
A month away, and then you come back, and
you can make it a week. You could
also not enough
snap
time to learn an instrument or something like that.
Right, yeah.
Okay. What would I do? I'd probably write a bunch of screenplays. I'd probably take all the ideas I've got that I don't have time to work on. I wouldn't draw anything for sure.
Yeah.
I would probably just take all this stuff that's rolling around my head and try to bang out actual good scripts for them.
That's fascinating. That's not the answer I would have anticipated for you for that. That's cool to hear. And just out of curiosity, why is that not something you do on the regular, on nights and weekends?
I think because I'm so scattered all the time. I just feel like I'm juggling so many different things at once between mainstream, work for hire stuff. Literally, I'm still doing. I'm updating the Abominable Charles Christopher again every week now. Yeah, since the new year started. So every Wednesday is just that. I'm doing this comic. I got another thing at DC that I'm supposed to. There's just all these zillions of things, and I actually feel I'm just racked with guilt every time I start working on another thing. I'm just oh God, and it's guilt. It's guilt. It's not it's a real philosophical issue, because it's partly it's just guilt at not making the wisest decisions in terms of providing for your family. There's just these fundamental things you have to prioritize, and then everything else is well, how many of these things can I start? I can't. I've got all these ideas for graphic novels and things, and I just don't have time to do enough of them, to the point where I've actually considered now hiring artists to work on stuff that I've written.
Yeah. Can I tell you, first of all, I feel such kinship with you right now because Brad can confirm this. As a topic for the show, Brad, do you remember I wrote this down that I wanted to talk about this, how, Karl, I feel guilt for projects that I'm not doing, if that makes sense. Projects don't even exist. I feel guilt that they don't come into the world and that I'm not working on them.
I feel that too. It's why I resumed the Charles Christopher strip, because I was I've done 85% of this, and now these characters who are now living character, they're not even just like concepts. They're actual fully formed characters who don't have any closure. I'm I owe it to these characters to finish this story. before I die, which is becoming more of a concern also. Like I'm just like aware of my mortality in a way that I never used to be. Like I'm pushing 50. So.
Well, okay, I know we were going to wrap it up, but I want to ask you one more question because you've just triggered a great thought that I wanted to ask you, because you were talking about you wanted to hire artists to work with you, maybe in sort of a mangaka way of like having a studio, maybe remotely, either way. It's also a thought that I've given to recently because I wanted to dip into your world a little bit and do an image title with a hired artist. And I just wanted to ask you real quick, for those that are not familiar with it, how does that process work? Like if, let's just say, just as a hypothetical, let's say you were a really handsome cartoonist named Dave Kellett and you wanted to hire another artist, you would write it, they would draw it. How would that hypothetically handsome cartoonist go about pitching to Image, working with Image, what to expect from that process?
Well, like assuming you've got your team together and like for me, like for anyone, I guess, like half the battle is finding someone you want to work with. Like, so works you really like, and then and then mentally, the big mental hurdle is like I've never worked on anything that I haven't drawn myself. So the big mental hurdle is handing over something that's extremely precious to you to someone, an artist, and not having any idea what you're knowing. You know for sure you're not going to get back what's in your head. You can only hope that you get back something way cooler than what you've written down or what you envisioned. So assuming you found the right person, then the process is really just putting together like a few pages of sample, like maybe like 3 or 4 pages of sample artwork, and like a synopsis, same way you'd pitch anything, and sending it to him. Like ideally, you track down Eric Stevenson at a convention, who's the publisher, which is I mean, and he's like, that's like finding a unicorn. Like he's like he's never around when you want to find him. But getting it greenlit, the process of getting it greenlit is basically sending it in, having someone there look at it and say, yeah, we'll do it. But the Image deal is so like, it's kind of been sort of different for everyone I know. Like when we I wasn't even present when Isola got greenlit. Brendan Fletcher, my partner, was talking to Eric and pitched it to him, and he said, yeah, let's do it. And it was just like a verbal agreement. And we said, okay. So I drew this whole thing before we had any kind of contract, like the first issue. And I didn't take, Image doesn't call them advances technically, because they don't like, they will sometimes give you like a bit of upfront money that I don't know what they call it, but you can take some, depending on who you are, I guess, or how they're feeling. Sometimes you can get some money up front to work on this thing or to pay your team. Which we didn't take, but essentially you're then working on a thing in the void, the same way you'd be working on anything for free until it comes out, and it won't even be solicited in a distribution catalog until you've completed at least 3 issues of it. So you're going to do 3 issues of free work. Yeah, really? And I talked to someone the other day who said they had to do 6 issues. So maybe that's changed. I don't know.
So Image has been burned too many times before they solicit, and they're like, nope, now you got to do 3 or 6. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
So then it'll get solicited. It'll go in the catalog. It'll ordered however much it gets ordered, and then you will once you pay. What is it now? It's been a while. I think Image takes like a flat fee of $2,500 US or something off the top of every issue that you publish. That's all they take, and it's really just to cover advertising costs and some office stuff. They don't own anything.
Oh, that's different than how we did it with How to Make Webcomics with them, Brad. So they've changed that in the intervening years.
Yeah. That was quite a while ago.
Yeah. But that's probably a more efficient question mark way of doing it. Of just saying, look, flat 25, that covers our cost, that covers our generalized overhead. You know,
as far as I know, like that's been the deal since Image's inception. So they'll take their flat 2,500. That's just like for using the Image eye and getting it in the catalog. And then they'll deduct what your printing costs were, and they'll deduct what your storage and all that. Basically, whatever it costs to make the thing, that all comes out of your end. Right. And then everything after that is yours. And then that's just the way Image works generally. And then how you split that up with your team is a whole other thing. And that's something else that I've seen done many different ways. But I will say, I think the most important thing to say, and it's something like we never really got around to talking about it. You were asking about it before. Was when you're working with another artist on a thing, like it is pretty much a given that you're going to that artist will have 50% of the intellectual property rights. Like it's extremely uncommon for anyone to hire. For example, if you were to hire an artist and say, "I've got this idea for an image comic and I want you to draw it, and I'm going to pay you handsomely, but you don't own anything." I think you would probably advocate against that deal. Like I would never, if anyone asked me for my advice about that deal, I would suggest don't take it because the standard deal now basically for any creator-owned book is that the writer and artist split the actual intellectual property 50-50. And then you're probably hiring a letterer and a colorist and maybe even an editor. And then in that case, we would the way we handled it was we would give them the page rate they asked for, and then we had a lawyer, and we would talk to. I just wanted to be very sure with the lawyer. I said, look, this is the contract, but I want to make sure that like whatever royalties occur here, like like trade paperback sales or whatever, if we exceed a certain amount of sales or there are significant royalties, that these people should get X percentage of it, and just to make sure that they're looked after, like just so
and
like,
have it delineated,
exactly, So they don't our colorist doesn't own anything, but if this ever took off or stuff got made into films, whatever, or the comic did really well, then she would get like a nice royalty from it.
Right, because as you were saying before, and for people that don't know, one of the rare and wonderful things about Image is they don't claim TV, movie, additional rights, video game rights to that title, which is, I mean, amongst the original starters of Image, there was briefly an argument about whether they should or shouldn't do that. Yeah. But they don't, and it's amazing that doesn't happen, because let's all be honest, that's where the big money is in comics, is selling that property onto Netflix or Amazon or Disney or whoever it's going to be. So what I'm hearing you say, Karl, is that if you bring in another artist, that's going to be 50%. And if you bring in additional people, that contractually will be delineated as you'll get 1%, you'll get 3%, you'll get 5% of the eventual sale.
Yeah, but not of actual ownership, just of like whatever residual, like whatever profits.
Right, whatever legal phrase that is of non-controlling, but a remuneration for.
But I've also seen people with like do books who bring in their colorist and letterer, and they do have a percentage of the creative ownership. And so it's whatever, just however you're comfortable. Yeah, the Image has nothing to do with that. You're basically running that show behind the scenes. They're just going to take your files and print them.
That actually, from Brad and my perspective, that is true, actually. As Brad could attest. I mean, the truth is, Brad did 80% of the work on how to make webcomics, and the other three of us did the other 20% of the work. So, yeah. But Image was great, and they were professional. But like Karl was saying, I found them to be super professional, but also a little loosey-goosey in a way that surprised me. Yeah. But maybe that's just human nature, in that you project on what you think a company is going to be like, but then you find out that it's just 30 nice people working to make comics, and they're in an office in California.
I think to get back to what I was saying before, like that's all of American comics. Everything is loosey-goosey. Like it's a miracle any of this stuff gets made.
And now that we brought that conversation full circle, I want to make sure that we get an opportunity to say, even if the Kickstarter is done by now when this show comes out, Karl's told us earlier that you're going to be running this on backer kit. So there's still time. Even if the Kickstarter itself is over, there's still time for you to get a copy of this comic for yourself. I've seen images from it, and I can tell you firsthand, it's a gangbuster comic. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's going to be fantastic.
Congratulations. It's gorgeous.
The name of the comic is Death Transit Tanager. It's by our friend Karl Kerschl. You can find all about this at karlkerschl.com. That's KarlSchl.com. All the stuff is going on over there. And Karl, it has been an absolutely delightful occasion to have you with us again.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been super fun. I feel like I've gotten a lot off my chest from years of listening to this show.
It's almost like a therapy session, right?
It's like that. I didn't get a Ziggy quote, but aside from that, everything's
although you did get a Susan McTaggart. I said Catherine McTaggart. Right. I don't know why.
Her sister.
So there you go, my friend. There you go. Well, on that note, I'll let Brad say it. I was going to steal the thunder from him, but I'm going to let him say it. Oh my goodness.
Well, on that note, in that case, you've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my ever-delightful friend, Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And my friend Dave Kellett, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped, and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And we thank Karl again. You can check him out over at karlkerschl.com. Thank you, Karl, for joining us. And the ComicLab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by Matt Woodard over at Woodsong Productions at www.woodsong.media.
If you love ComicLab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode.
And ComicLab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/ComicLab. So we'll go ahead and say that twice. Hey, Border Patrol, Karl is stealing sneaking books across the border.
Who'd want to read this?
Hey, Jimmy, come check this out. Look at this. This guy makes a career out of this. Oh! Oh, Jimmy, come check out this guy's life work. Oh, all of his self-worth is in this book. And check out his face. Look at this guy. Oh, my God. He's trying to cross the border with this.
I'm doing the best I can with the face that I got and the readership that I got. Can I just please get across the border? I would like to get this stuff across the border.
I know that. I feel like that's how I would feel. I would just be shrinking if the Canadian border guards were like, really? This is what you want to bring into our beautiful country? You want to bring this bullshit in? I'm sorry. Do you have a match?
It's so weird, right? Because like on one hand, you're just totally affronted, but on the other hand, like you're completely helpless because there's a bunch of guys packing guns.
Yeah, they got guns.
Gonna send you home.
If they say think of how terrible it is to open up the website and open up the web and see that somebody's written a critical review of your comic. Now imagine that guy has an automatic weapon on their hands.
Yeah, and can detain you.
Guys, you know what this is? This is all the elementary school bullying that pushed us into art in the first place. Yeah, now it's come back in our adult life to haunt us with guns.
Yeah. It's basically, it's just high school kind of like recomposited into
yeah, exactly.
Like you knew those guys were going to become border guards or policemen anyway.
Oh, no shit. Yeah, all they need to do is spin you around, give you a wedgie, and the whole thing is complete.
When it really like completed the whole image for Karl when the border guards are like, they're making fun of his book, but then they wheeled out a locker just so they could shove him in it. Like that was unnecessary.
No, that was not necessary. And that other one that accepted your invitation to the prom and then unaccepted it when he got a better offer, that guy was way out of line. I did not like hearing about that at all.